All right, now that we have our dev branch checked in and managed on the remote, we can start to build our application and continue to check in and manage it on our local and on remote, and be able to then start building our application. So we will start with our command line, and we go back and we look at our database and our migration. So the first thing we're going to do is confirm where we are. We're in Buildly in the Open Build CMS. We look at the directories, and here we have our DB SQLite because we've already configured this, and our Docker file, everything that we need in order to manage the application, including our git ignore file, which helps us manage what's stored in Git. So we'll start with manage PY and make migrations just to confirm that all of our database configuration is correct. You can see there's no changes detected, and that is because we've gone through and modified here our migrations. We reset it initially to the default, which is just the home page, and that's our initial migrations file. That will also trigger all of the wagtail migrations for all of the things that it needs. And then I've gone back and deleted the other ones, and instead added and cleaned up the model file so that we only have the ones that are required for Buildly. So Buildly needs a developers page, an about page, a Foundry page, and a contact page, as well as the home page. The news section or the blog will be managed again by Puput and its templates and its process. So these are the only ones that we need to manage here. And you can see in our templates file, again, we have our includes for our header, which has now been modified to say Buildly and has its default navigation configured as well. And our footer, same thing, Buildly and on the default navigation. So this is now configured to run for Buildly. The next piece then is, again, making sure we're in dev, right? And we have our requirements that have run. All of our databases configured. Everything's run. We go to our settings here, and what we'll do is we'll run the server. The first thing that we want to do when we open up the new server page is look at the home page, make sure that it's configured properly. I'm not sure why it's black, but that's where it is. So now let me go to our admin, and we've already created an admin user via the create super user, and we log in. And now we can see I've already gone ahead and created previously a home page and an about page. If you go and look at those live, you can then see the live version of the about page, as well as the live version of the home page. And you can see the navigation here, Foundry News About. I'm still not clear on why the CSS isn't loading, but that's a different question for a different day. So now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and add another sub page. If you go and configure within pages here, off of home, right? We want to add a child page that's not about, and so we'll add one called, if we look at the navigation here, we started with about, now we'll add a news section, which is driven by the blog functionality or the content type. So we'll add one blog, call it news, and we'll go directly to publish. You can see there's a couple more configurations you can add there. But for the most part, it's the same. And these can also have their own child pages. So you can have sub-navigation within those as well. So now if we go back to the Buildly section. Here we'll see when we go to news, we have our blog section configured. And that means that we can add new articles directly to the blog section via the news here, right? So when we create a new section, a new page, and we want to do a blog entry, we can add it as a content type of blog, have a different header image, different descriptions, right? And then have it as a child of the news section. So if we go back to news here, I can add a new article and I'll call it test the news, and I'll write some content and I'll have an excerpt of that content. I can even choose an image to upload as the header. I can tag it as test. Working our Django there, and then we can save it as a draft again, or we can publish it or submit for moderation, which means we have an editor that's going to review it. If I publish it, now I can see test the news. If I go back to the news section, I'll see I have a new article called Test the News that I can then read inside as a child of the news section. And there's our first blog entry into the system. And now we have back to home and our Buildly homepage, as well as our news and about section are all functioning. When we go back to the Foundry, however, we notice that, again, we don't have a page. So again, we want to set that up as a child of the home page. Add child Foundry, name it Foundry, which will, of course, the important thing is it will create a slug called Foundry, which is what we use for the navigation. I'll publish that. And now when we go back to Foundry, based on the slug, we see our Foundry page for Buildly. And then when we go and add one more child page, which we need for developers, we will add a child page. And we don't have a template for this, but we do have the content type created. And what we can do is call this developers. And that will, again, give us in our promote, our slug, the developers URL. We'll publish that. And if we're lucky, this should generate an error for us now when we click on the developers section, because there is no template developers page. So what we'll do is we'll go back to our code and we'll look at our templates under the home section, right? Home, templates, home templates. And you see we have a developers HTML page, but not developers underscore page. So we'll rename that to developers underscore page, which is required by that. And now we have a developer section. And when we come back here now, there we have our developers. Now we have a configured application. You can see some of our CSS is cached from before. So I know that CSS is caching. I can do two things. I can go back through on here and I can add in using our developer tool. I can clear out the cache, or I can do it here via, whoops, not that one. Via Chrome, I can do clear browsing data. And I only want to do cached images and files, which will clear out the CSS. Clear that data out. And now, if I hide this, if I refresh, it should load the new CSS. So now we have our default CSS for Buildly all configured and running. We have our developers section, which has content from all over our portfolio, Foundry, news, and about. So now we have everything configured and we can start to work on dynamic content. We can rewrite the static content wherever we want, and our home and page can be configured as well. So the main things to remember from this are primarily in the code, we want to start, when we start off, we want to make sure we're in dev and we've created a dev branch that we're working off of. And if we do git status, here we can see all of the changes that we've made to our branch, buildly1. And you can see all of the things that we need to check in. So we're at the end of our day. Things are working, but we also want to be transparent. And we say we added content types for buildly. We want to get push origin buildly, one, which is the branch we're working on. And now when we go to GitHub again, we can see that we have our recent push, and now a minute ago we had an even more recent push that shows all of the different changes that we've made. We're ahead of this specific branch. We can go and look specifically, compare buildly1 to our default. So what we have here is our Open Build CMS, or if we want to, we start with Open Build main. We can compare that with buildly1. We can look at the changes that were made, clean up settings for production, settings to dev, and added the content types. We can even load the diffs on each one of those files, or just load the commit details directly. Look and see what we've made. There's the changes for the migration, the different models, the changes to the home page. Again, removing of the others. We removed all of the different classes for the different pages, changed our content from Open Build to Buildly, from portfolio to developers, removed the templates that were related to those content types, and removed the homepage content. So that all looks pretty good. We've added all of that into our base. We can create a pull request based on that and merge that into main, or we can continue working. And since we're not done, we're going to continue to work off of the dev branch and continue to use this before we submit our pull request until we're at a more done state, because that essentially moves it into main, which could be production and automatically deployed via DigitalOcean. But since we're not quite there yet, we'll save that for another time. But now you have the basics of how to configure, how to clone, how to get started, and how to use the database. Next time we'll do a little bit more about a fresh install and how to create the site, configure it to the site, and how to use the different content types and generate brand new content types and dynamic content types. All right, thanks.